You're listening to the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast. We all have leadership within us, and once we understand how to challenge perceived limitations, we're able to influence those we're leading. Josh is a leadership coach, trainer, and speaker. He's also a veteran of the United States Air Force with over 20 years of leadership experience. Are you ready to transform your leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results? Let's get ready for liftoff. It's time to go from great to greater. Here's Josh in today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast. I'm joined today by a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, who I met at last year's Summit of Greatness. It's an event put on by Lewis Howes every year in his hometown of Columbus, Ohio. My friend and my guest is an LPL financial planner, a motivational speaker, and an NCAA football champion with the Ohio State University. I'm joined today by Russell Doup. Russell, thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited. We've talked about this for a little bit and making it happen.
Yeah, making it happen. I'm excited to make it happen, and I'm excited for for our audience to hear who you are. You know, as I mentioned, I've had the pleasure of getting to know you more over the last year, and something I love about you, Russell, is that every time we talk, we're always trying to help each other grow our businesses, trying to help each other grow as a person. And so I'm excited for this audience to hear who you are, what you do, and how you do it. So let's jump right into who Russell Doup is. Give us all the details and your backstory.
Yeah, man. Well, start off, I'm 31. I'm from Mount Vernon, Ohio, which is a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio, and grew up playing every sport you can imagine pretty much, and ended up being a walk-on at Ohio State and playing for 3 head coaches and 3 different positions, which is kind of how I got into the whole walk-on mentality, and got into financial advising, where now I'm an LPL financial planner. Been building my own business now for 6.5 years of the grind, which is really fun. I love challenging myself mentally and physically, which dives into why when I hit 30 years old, for some reason, decided to start doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and found this new whole path. And it ties into, I'm sure, what we'll go into about the walk-on mentality with also the growth mindset. How do I continue to always be challenging myself going forward? And I feel like that's what I really hang my hat on these days, is kind of how do I continue to push myself and challenge myself, and then kind of give that to others as well, and hopefully be motivational, whether speaking or just the actions that I'm taking every day.
That's so good, man. Well, I can tell you, I can attest to the fact that you are a motivation, you are an inspiration, and a lot of it has to do with your mindset. You alluded to a couple of times the walk-on mentality, which is the namesake for this podcast episode, but also a growth mindset. And so if you would walk us through what is the walk-on mentality?
Yeah. And I really kind of think they're interchangeable. It's just kind of how do I label the growth mindset? And the walk-on mentality, from my story, it started back in high school, but really what I kind of overarchingly look at it as is that we all have this subconscious potential that we need to discover. And to summarize that is, how do we believe in ourselves more? And I think it all starts back with just finding little wins. If I want to summarize it, finding little wins and figuring out, hey, we're capable of more than we think we are. So like, what else am I capable of? And that's when I hit 30, it was like this whole journey of like, what else can I do? Or even goes into like, what foods do I like? What's something new I can try? And I'm always curious and figuring out what are those things. And now I'm engaged, and it's like, what's a new journey me and Mariah can both do together? So like finding things that it's both of our firsts and going and experiencing that at the same time. And so that's kind of a fun new journey that I've been on, and kind of trying to still open my eyes and like, what all different aspects of life can I add that into?
Great, man. I mean, you're talking about the idea of gaining perspective. And when we get perspective, we're able to get clarity and direction along the way. And I think part of challenging our limiting beliefs or our mindset to begin with is doing exactly what you're doing. I mean, you're disrupting your routine. I'm saying I'm going to go and do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now. I'm going to start, really asking myself, hey, what foods do I like? And let me try something that I haven't had before. Let me start expanding my mind and subsequently expanding my perspective, which then gives us clarity and direction. So talk to us more, Russell, about your experience as a high school athlete. You mentioned that you walked on to the Ohio State University. I want to make sure I get it correct, but you walked on to play for the Buckeyes.
Yeah.
And you said you played 3 different positions, had 3 different head coaches. Walk us through that experience.
Yeah. So to even make it more fun is I never played football until halfway through my senior year of high school. So it was something that I wasn't even thinking about. And I always played basketball, baseball, soccer, ran track in middle school, did swimming, gymnastics, wrestling as a kid. So I did pretty much everything but football. And what happened was an opportunity that was out of my control, or an unforeseen circumstance that didn't affect me, but ended up affecting me. And it was the kicker in a soccer game tore his knee up, and the backup kicker had a chance for a game-winning field goal that was really like an extra point, and had one of the worst kicks you could ever imagine, to the point where the coaches were like, we need to find someone else to kick. And that's when they came up to me and other people and asked, like, Russell, we'd love to have you on the team and be our kicker. Because I'd messed around with it before, but I didn't really know how good or bad I was. I just knew I could kind of do it. And the first coach came up to me and I said, like, no, thank you. Basketball is my favorite sport. And I kind of didn't want anything to get in the way of my identity, which I would really consider that was my identity back then. And all of a sudden, maybe a couple of days went by, one of my friends, Matt, came up and asked me, like, Russell, we'd love to have you on the team. Again, I told him, like, no thanks. Like, I'm getting ready for basketball season. Especially when you think, like, you only have to your 12th grade for a senior in high school. That's my last year I'll ever have playing high school basketball. So I didn't want anything to get in the way of having the best season we could possibly have. And then maybe a couple more days went by. It was a Friday, and one of the coaches called me when I was at home. And I remember being outside by the basketball hoop, and it's like, Russell, like, don't answer me right now. Take the weekend to think about it, but we would love to have you on the team. Like, could you at least just take some time and, like, think it out before giving me your answer? Whatever it is, that's fine, but please do that. And so I did it. And for some reason, after being asked that third time, which to their side of it, like, persistency, they didn't just take no for an answer. And I don't know if that would have been the last time they would ask me, but I thought about it. It was like, it's my senior year of high school. I'll probably never play football again. And this might be my only chance. And I was trying to, like, look ahead, say 10 years and think about my 10-year anniversary or 10-year reunion for school and be like, it'd be kind of cool to, like, just take this opportunity and be able to say I played on the high school team and get a little varsity letter, and just decided to say, like, what do I have to lose? And just took the opportunity to give it a shot. So I was really first part of my walk-on mentality is be open to opportunities. And I took that opportunity and didn't think what I thought was the ceiling and how high it would go would have been just playing high school football. And it turned out way more than I ever expected, positively. So that was a big lesson for me in that regard.
So you just talked about being open to opportunities. So walk us through the concept of how a lot of us probably see opportunities on a regular basis, but for whatever reason, we're deliberately choosing to say no to those opportunities. Why do we say no to those opportunities, and what benefits can we have when we do say yes?
One, I definitely think it's almost like HR. It's easier to say no than to take the time to say yes and, like, explore it. Because a lot of us are going so fast throughout our day, especially if you have kids. I'm sure, like, you feel like you don't have a lot of time. So it's when we don't even have time for ourselves, how do we have time to add something new in? And I feel like by saying yes, it totally changed my whole routine as well. Like, what I was doing and, like, going, now I had practice however many days a week and, like, games to go to. And so I think it's easier to say no in that regard. So being open to opportunities creates sometimes maybe a new awareness after you work that muscle. I feel like Lewis Howes will talk about, as well as some of the other podcasts I listen to, is like, if you want to get better at being, like, with adversity, go put yourself in situations where you have to develop that. Or you want to go work on your mental fortitude, go in situations where you have to work on that. So it's like, the more I say yes to new opportunities, I'll probably be more aware, and learning when to say no is also very important as well. So we only have so much time throughout the day. So that's a challenge as well.
That's good, man. And, you just alluded to the importance of boundaries and how important boundaries can play in our life. And boundaries aren't necessarily for us. Boundaries are for people around us. It lets them know what we will and what we won't tolerate. But, to your point, you mentioned that, you started, you recognize, like, a lot of us are going to say, hey, I don't have the time. But I'd also ask, are we making the time? Because when we say yes to something or someone, there's likely a corresponding no. But what if we start managing our time more efficiently in order for us to actually say yes to some opportunities that are being presented to ourselves? You mentioned, Russell, that you talked about your journey into high school football. And what about your journey going on to the Ohio State team? You mentioned your walk-on there. Walk us through, pun intended, I guess, what that process looked like onto.
Yeah. So when I ended up saying yes to join the team, there were only like 6 games left. So I had played 6 games of high school football, and maybe about 2 or 3 in, my dad was like, we should go get you kicking lessons. And we sent an email to someone who actually kicked at Ohio State. And so I went from my hometown, drove about an hour to go get lessons from, his name is Dan Stoltz. And I'm just warming up. And all of a sudden, like as I'm warming up, he's like, hey, have you ever considered kicking in college? You have a pretty strong leg. And it was something I never even thought about. Like I was just doing this for fun and like not really looking to pursue it as a passion. And when he said, like, when I said no, all of a sudden he's like, well, you have a strong leg. Like it's late in the process though. So you can maybe walk on to a small Division I school or a Division II school or a Division III. But I think he's like, I feel like it's something you would be sorry if you didn't give it a chance. And so with that, he suggested I go make a recruiting tape, which we did the next day. It's on YouTube, actually, if you look it up. And it's funny. I'm wearing a Russell Athletic shirt because it had my name on it.
And, I'll be sure to add that link in this podcast episode. Very good.
Perfect. It cracks me up because I was skinny with a long neck. I still have a long neck, so we sent that out, and a buddy that worked with my dad, so one of his friends like burned a bunch of DVDs back then, and we started sending it out to schools.
You dated yourself, Russell. You just dated yourself by saying burning a bunch of DVDs. So
hey, I'm in my 30s. I was in that prime time where I remember dial-up internet, so where you had to pay for texting on your phone, all that fun stuff, the ringback tones, all the good stuff.
Oh yeah, ringback tones. I guess.
Oh gosh, yeah. But so with that, we burn a bunch of DVDs, and we're looking at schools to send them out to. Which in Ohio, there's the conference, the MAC conference, which is Ohio University and Miami of Ohio, and schools like that. I sent it to. I didn't look at Ohio State because they had a kid that was signed in my class, and they were one of the best teams in the country. And I was like, there's no point in even sending it there. So I did it initially. And then I looked at schools outside of Ohio where I was looking up kickers who I thought had bad stats. I was like, well, maybe I can compete with one of these people and have a chance. And so like Notre Dame, they said you had to be accepted into the school. They don't. Boise State, I sent one to. They said they don't take walk-ons. And so all of a sudden, after I sent it out to all these different schools, I was like, what's the worst thing that happens by taking this DVD and sending it to Ohio State is, one, they don't reply. And the best thing that I thought was going to come from it was that they send me a rejection letter like, hey, we saw your tape, but like, you're not cut out for us. Like, but thank you. And I was like, that'd be kind of funny to have. And all of a sudden I got an email from Greg Gillum, who he's actually with Coach Fickle, who was one of my coaches up at Wisconsin now. And he's the chief of staff is what his title is up there. And so he sent me this email saying like, hey, we watched your video. You caught our attention. We already signed a kid in your class, but we're always looking for strong competition. Like, have you decided where you're going to school? And if not, like, would you be interested in coming for a visit? And when I got that, like, I couldn't believe this message I received. It still gives me goosebumps. And it's like,
I'm getting some right now. I mean, you cut you off, Russell, but you're literally talking about the benefits of having a growth mindset. Because initially you said, no, I'm going to have a scarcity mindset. Why would I send my tape to Ohio State? And then you said, you know what? No, like I'm going to let's think outside the box for a second. You send your tape into Ohio State. They send you a letter back. What did the letter say? And keep on going.
Yeah. So pretty much that's what I said. It was like asking me like, have I considered and would I be interested in coming for a visit? And it's one of those things like, how do I pass at least up going for a visit? And my dad was really big on like, I wanted to get into business and go to business school, like making sure, does the school have a good, I think he would have bypassed this, to be honest, but like, do they have a good business school? And like, if you were just going to be a student only, like, what do you think of the school? And so when I went for the visit, it was one of those things. It's like, a lot of people say, do you want to be the big fish in the little pond or the little fish in the big pond? And a lot of times they never give the opportunity or mindset of like, how can I become the big fish in the big pond? And that was something like, why not go give it a shot? And see what happens. You can always transfer. Transfer portal is a lot different now than it was back when I was there. People didn't do it as often. And now it's kind of the Wild West. But I decided to give it a shot and just say yes to the opportunity, and figured I would regret looking back never giving that kind of opportunity a chance. I'm very glad that I did it.
Very good. And so this was, speaking of dating yourself, so this was a little over a decade ago, and you played on the team that beat, tell me, was it Alabama in the national championship?
So that was 2014 was Oregon. We played Alabama in the playoffs, semifinals. And my freshman year, we played in the Sugar Bowl against Arkansas.
Okay.
And then, so that was Coach Tressel, then Coach Fickle, and Coach Meyer. It was kind of the 2010 to 14.
So what was that like? You're going into college as a walk-on kicker, and you mentioned there's two other positions you played after kicking, and you have three coaches. Walk us through all.
Yeah, so going in, I had the first day I'm walking in, and it's like all these dudes are big guys. Obviously, when you go to that's what I realized the difference between Division I school to say Division II and III is a lot of the guys in Division II and III at those elite schools have a lot of talent. They just might not have been blessed with the same genetics of guys that are 6'6", 315 pounds that you just can't go coach. Sure. People are just born with that. And so I felt like I was kind of in over my head that first day walking in, because I'm this scrawny little kid going to warm up, and I had the worst first day that you could ever imagine. You would have thought I didn't know how to kick when I was trying to warm up. And obviously it's one of those things when you start off bad, you start digging yourself into a hole. So now I'm rushing, my heart rate probably was raising, and I just couldn't get out of it. And luckily Devin Barclay, who was the starting kicker at the time, who was actually the number one high school soccer player in the country when he was in school. So he actually went and played professional soccer before he came to Iowa State. Okay. And he pulled me to the side. So he was a walk-on initially too. And he said, remember why you came here, which kickoffs. My main thing I initially came for was kickoffs in high school. I never kicked a field goal in high school either, as a fun fact. And he did a great job kind of giving me that perspective of hey, when you're out here, focus on your kickoffs. We had an indoor facility, and when we're kind of on our own, we can work on your field goal. And so he kind of helped me kind of settle down and kind of as a mentorship role, lead me into that. And part of it is when I had the worst first day, not thinking I almost knew how to kick, I was very starting to doubt myself. I'm did I get myself in over my head? Should I have taken this opportunity? Maybe I should actually go somewhere else or go play basketball or baseball, because baseball is actually my best sport and basketball is my favorite sport. So I picked this new endeavor that I've never really tried. And I was really glad that he gave me that kind of perspective, because I was really starting to doubt myself. And once you start doing that, it's so hard to change that mindset back without external help. And that's where I really try to give myself reality checks these days with trying to grow a business and kind of learning, don't just take no for an answer, because that's how other people gave me that opportunity. And I'm very thankful they asked me more than once, because if they would have just quit after I said no once, I wouldn't be where I am today either.
You never know where you'd be right now. And, you mentioned earlier about surrounding yourselves in specific situations where you can grow your mental fortitude. And I'd imagine, maybe you didn't realize it at the time, but when you had that worst first day, you were inadvertently surrounding yourself where, hey, I'm going to have to build some mental fortitude here. And we have people around us, multiple minds are better than one. I'll always say that. And we have people around us who can pour into us, who can speak truth into us. Man, it's great to have people who can help you climb out of that funk, if you will.
Right.
Russell, you mentioned how you're growing a business. We talked about growing a business. I will say this too. When you first started this episode, you mentioned that you've been on the grind for 6 years, and I love hearing you say that, because it's a good reminder that when you find your calling, when you find your purpose, we can't necessarily expect overnight success. But if you keep at it, if you stay consistent, I know that you've grown a lot in 6 years. Doesn't mean that you haven't been grinding for 6 years, but I know you well enough to know that you're not going to quit. The only way that we can fail at something is if we quit. And, not to rabbit trail too hard, but we also know the importance of failing to begin with, because if we're not failing, we're not learning. And if we're not learning, we're not growing. And if we're going to grow through something, we got to be willing to go through something. And you're truly going through the grind to grow your business. So talk to us about what you're doing. I know you mentioned you're an LPL financial planner. What is LPL? And also, what do you do with financial planning?
Okay. Yeah. So LPL is our broker dealer, stands for Linsco and Private Ledger. And they're there to protect me and protect our clients from kind of bad actors in the space. Everyone has heard of Bernie Madoff. So it's kind of there, which those things sadly can still happen, but it's how do we kind of protect ourselves and protect others. So with financial planning, I help my clients get from point A to point B, which was a term we always used at football, but it's also trying to look at it as financial advice, but also I really like to use the term financial leadership, where it's not just me sitting back, you only hear from me once a year. It's really being proactive with my clients. So being on the journey with them, because I'm helping lead them, they still got to take actions to get to retirement and save money and budget. Like I can't do that without them helping do that. And they got to be wanting to do that too. So it's got to be a two-way relationship. I'm sure, as you know, when you're coaching people, it's like how much more fun and easy it is with, it's not always easy, but it's how much easier it is when you get kind of a dynamic of back and forth versus you just kind of going one way. It's part of it's like, I've learned from having certain clients, it's like, why are they even using me if I can't get them to respond? It's not fun either. So it's kind of helping people kind of try to get clarity in their life, try to get more motivated to kind of achieve their goals, whether short-term, medium, long. A lot of them are families with young kids going from buying their first home and helping figure out budgeting and finances for that to graduating, as I like to call it, into their second home, whether they're getting promoted, and also the networking piece, things that don't even deal with the finance. I love introducing people to that I think kind of would help each other grow, or you never know what opportunities may come later. So there's so many things outside of the spectrum of just finance that I feel like being independent allows me to have that kind of add-ons of also the perks of why I like going the route I'm going too.
Sure, that's so good. I mean, we know that we can lead a horse to water, but we can't make it drink, right? And you're kind of alluding to the fact that, hey, we can provide a lot of direction, guidance, support, even answers. But the way you are really changing the game in financial planning is you are truly viewing yourself as a financial leader for who you're partnering with, and you're going alongside them in a journey, which is incredible. I mean, anytime, as I mentioned earlier, it's the concept of multiple minds are better than one. And once again, you're not simply meeting with them and there's no point of contact for a short period of time. You are meeting with them as often as necessary, as often as you know is needed in order to help grow and develop them and help them in their financial journey. But you're walking alongside them in that journey the entire time. And I know you well enough to know, man, you are someone who is regularly, proactively communicating with your clients and your customers, and ultimately you're forming relationships to turn into friends too. And man, you're a great person to have in anyone's life. And so if anyone's listening to this, looking for a financial planner, I highly recommend getting in touch with Russell Doup. And before I ask you, Russell, how our audience can get in touch with you, I do have a couple more questions as we wrap up this episode. The first is, what advice would you have for someone who is looking to grow their business and find success within it?
Yeah, I would say try to find the peers, whether they're in your line of business or outside, because I feel like all types of businesses relate to one another in some shape or form. But when you're finding those people that are where you want to be, also asking yourself, it's not really something to share with whoever you're reaching out to, but ask yourself, do they have the same values as me? Which goes back to, do I even know my values? Because they have to sacrifice, like family is going to be a big thing for me when I'm getting married and have kids. Like, did those people sacrifice family time to get there? And how much am I willing to do versus wanting to be present for the family? And asking things like that to make sure, like, did they have to cut corners that I do not want to cut, that are non-negotiables for me? Because then figuring out your own path, because what they took isn't going to be the same as what you'll take, but it helps kind of give you that guidance. And I'd say that would be a big thing. And I know I didn't even go over Coach Fickle or Coach Meyer earlier, but trying to figure out like being adaptable and just like, I always love asking and hearing like what challenges people went through, because it was never an easy path for those people that look like they have it and made it. They either were right place, right time. A lot of the times I found out, probably inherited something or born into something, but you can find people who build it and made it themselves. But usually it was someone else helped get a foot in the door to something that led to that opportunity. So it's always, to your point, more than one mind kind of helping create opportunity.
And at the very least, man, I mean, you're able to surround yourself with people who can help you. Now, granted, you don't want to. I mean, there certainly takes a lot of hard work and effort along the way too. But man, what you say is find a coach, find a mentor, find someone who you're willing to put under the scrutiny of, so that they can speak truth into you and share some blind spots with you, to help you grow and develop. Now, I will say also, to your point, don't just find anybody. I mean, really do your due diligence and determine, is this person the right fit for me? Is this the right coach or mentor for me before I move forward?
And to that point too, sometimes you might not even realize or know, but you have to commit to somebody and then learn. It's like dating. You probably really don't know if you may know if you don't like someone on the first date, but if you go on a second, you can find out for sure, because they may actually surprise you.
Sure.
And you just had a bad day and you met them on a bad day or something for them. So
I always fall back on Maya Angelou's quote, which is, I've learned that people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget the way you made them feel. And if you can come in contact with somebody who makes you feel a certain kind of way, good, bad, or indifferent, you're likely going to know if this person is going to be the right fit for me. But yeah, to your point, man, it probably is very much like dating. I mean, and so you got to get out there. You got to play the field to some degree in order to determine, is this the right person for me? Now, last question, Russell, I got for you, and that is this. I imagine that in your high school sports career and, of course, in your college career, do you have any crazy or wild stories that come to mind if I were to ask you that question?
I would say a very interesting, kind of crazy story looking back on, and at the moment I also miss a lot, was when we transitioned from Coach Trussell to Coach Fickle. He was our coach for a year, and then Coach Meyer came in. We got kicked out of our locker room because we had one of the worst seasons ever. We went 6-7, which hadn't happened in I forget how many years, even though that year was one of the most fun years I had, because I became the second string kicker, because I was like bottom of the totem pole when I first came in, and I became second string kicker. And even though we had a bad season, then Coach Meyer came in, kicked us out of the locker room, told us we had to show up. It was like 5 a.m. the next day, 10 degrees outside and snowing. And I was stupid. I wore shorts, a cutoff shirt, not thinking anything. We had to go outside and do 100-yard bear crawls, 100 yards of lunges, and what they called scalded dogs, which is like a single leg bear crawl, which sucked. We had to do 50 yards and then switch to another leg. But they were really big on this thing that was called +2. So you didn't just have to go through, like, to the line. You had to go through the line and do an extra. So they were big on, like, when the whistle blows, like, keep finishing, not just cut off when the whistle blows. And I remember one of my buddies, Andrew Norwell, he still plays in the NFL today, and he did a lunge through the line and then didn't do another one. They made him go back and do another 100 yards of lunges, which then obviously sets the example of, like, oh, they're serious. And I would say that was probably the craziest story, because they were trying to get people to quit and, like, see who really wanted to be here. And because they didn't want someone that was just half-ed. They wanted someone who was fully committed. And Coach Meyer was also a psychology major, and I'm sure some of this stuff were some tactics that he was trying to leverage, and probably coaches that he had around him or advisors that he had around him too. How do I make sure to break them down to build them up into the culture I want to have? Because we all have our tendencies that we just got from growing up, how we were raised and everything, and how can we shape ourselves to the culture that we want to be a part of, and make sure, like, we might be different, and which is not a bad thing, but how do we kind of sharpen our iron to be where we want to be?
So, man, I mean, you're describing the last 2 reps at the gym. You know, this is like the concept: growth and comfort can't coexist together. So give me your all, and then give me a couple more. You know, and so that's a thank you, sir. Have another kind of moment.
Right.
And hey, thank you so much for joining us on the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast. Russell, how can our audience get in touch with you and connect with you if they're interested in your services?
Yeah, I'd say I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, just Russell Doup, and then I'm sure we can put the link on there. And then on Instagram, I have @RussDoup as my personal, and then @RussDoup CFP is my business one. And I just try to, like, give content typically about 5 days a week of just situations that I've been dealing with clients or prospects or questions some of my friends have asked me, and just I know if they're asking me, other people may need that same advice or ideas. So trying to give it out. So I'd say probably either, LinkedIn or Instagram would be the initial way. Then we can connect and exchange numbers or whatever makes sense after that.
Great. Sounds good. And I can attest to the fact that Russell is on LinkedIn often. So I love seeing your posts come through. And you mentioned Russell Doup. It's DOUP, Russell Doup. If you want to get in touch with Russell.
Like soup. Yeah.
Like soup, but it's spelled like we're said differently, right? So
yeah.
All right. Well, as you mentioned the disclosure earlier, Russell, securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA/SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Thank you for tuning in to the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast. Have a great day, everyone. Don't forget to smile today. Tell your loved ones how much they mean to you. I'm Josh Parnell, reminding you to keep leading well.